Hello and welcome to this month's episode of Pro Spotlight, where we feature our tax pros, the people that help make tax filing easier. I'm Christian Ortega, and on this episode, we have Scott Transue, a tax file pro from Las Vegas, Nevada. Scott, how are you doing?
Very well, Christian. Thank you.
You're welcome. What got you into wanting to become a tax preparer?
Well, way back in 2010, it happened a little bit surprisingly, if you will. I had been doing taxes for friends and family, mostly non-compensated, of course. And I saw a advertisement for one of the big chain tax firms. So I applied and got a call from the franchise owner, I don't know, maybe a week later, asking me to come in, and got the job and wound up staying with that particular franchise owner for about 5 years, including a branch manager position about 2 years in. So gave me the chance to see all kinds of different tax situations on the 1040 side. And it really solidified that this was something that I wanted to do, if nothing else, part-time, but also in many cases full-time, as a career. So it happened a little bit surprisingly, but I'm very happy that it did happen.
What were you doing before?
I had been in various jobs within the public sector, state of New York as an accountant, and also spent some time as a policy analyst with the New York State legislature when I was in graduate school. So my career has been varied, but it has been almost exclusively accounting related since 2010.
What is it about taxes that drew your interest?
I looked at taxes almost like somebody else might look at a jigsaw puzzle. It was filling in the blanks, and it was completing something where I also had the opportunity to research things that I didn't maybe know an awful lot about. And that was something that I enjoyed doing. So it also fits my personality really well. I'm a person who enjoys looking things up and solving issues and solving problems. So it's been a really nice fit.
How do you compare your career in tax compared to what it was prior?
It's a lot more stabilized, I guess is the way to put it. I think previously I was applying for positions and taking them without necessarily having a really long-term path in my head. And that comes, I think, to some degree from being a non-traditional student. I was in my late 20s when I was in graduate school. So it wasn't something that I was doing straight out of my 4-year degree. And I think it's a career where obviously you make it what you want to make it. If you want it to be full-time, it can certainly be full-time. If you're okay with it being part-time, then certainly it can be. But there's also other things around taxes besides preparation that one can get into that can be kind of fun too. So it's been a nice thing to settle into.
What was the moment where you feel your decision to become a tax preparer really paid off for how you want your life to be at this stage?
It's really funny that you should ask that, because it was the pandemic that really solidified it. Because prior to the pandemic, I had been on the seminar circuit for 3 different companies over the course of about 7 years. A lot of travel. Didn't mind traveling, but it was a lot of travel, and you are, for better or for worse, you are beholden to airline schedules and airline issues and getting into hotels really late at night and so forth. I enjoyed the teaching part. The travel part got to be a little bit of a hassle on occasion. So when the pandemic occurred, and I certainly don't want to make light of the pandemic, but when it did occur, that industry stopped for the most part, except in a virtual sense. So I was forced, if you will, into deciding what my next move was going to be. And luckily for me, I had the tax knowledge and the tax experience behind me. Got my enrolled agent license back in 2014 while I was with the franchise owner. And I realized that, hey, this is something that I can do as much as I want to, obviously during the season, a little bit less off season, but still there's work out there. I was not beholden to a cubicle as it were, if I didn't want to be. I was not somebody who ever really enjoyed the cubicle atmosphere in the first place. I much preferred remote work if I could get it. And I fashioned my life around working from home. And it was not something I planned. It was because of the pandemic. But in my case, it seems to have worked out very, very well.
How does it feel having that stability now versus when you had a much more hectic schedule?
Depends on who you ask. If you ask my spouse, it's, she was used to me being gone 5 days a week and being home 2 days a week. And now I'm home all the time. And we joke a lot of times that, hey, this wasn't the agreement, but it is what it is. I really enjoy the remote aspect because I can take work from pretty much anywhere that I want to. With the enrolled agent license, obviously, that applies in all 50 states, even though not all 50 states have an income tax. And I can work with who I want to work with. I can do the kind of work that I want to settle into. If I want to focus purely on business returns, I can do that. If I want to focus a lot on 1040s for a while, I can do that as well. So it's a nice merger of skills and also just my inherent personality. Like I said, it's worked out very, very well.
You mentioned getting your EA credential in 2014. What spurred you to obtain that degree?
A few different things. First of all, realizing that as a what's called non-credentialed preparer, which is to say someone who isn't either a CPA, an attorney, or an enrolled agent, the prospects I had for getting hired by certain clients was limited. The prospects for doing certain types of returns was limited without having that credential. So I was looking online one night and realized the IRS offered that license. I didn't know it at the time. And I certainly didn't know the IRS sponsored a license where the license was intended to help the taxpayer versus helping the IRS. That was kind of ironic to me. But indeed, the license did exist. And it was a matter of going through an exam that was grueling. Back in 2014, it was grueling. I've heard that it's gotten even more difficult since then. But getting that license enabled me to advertise myself or tell anybody that was thinking of bringing me on that I was a credentialed preparer. And it's resulted in opportunities that would not have come about had I not gone ahead and gotten the enrolled agent certification.
How do you prepare for an exam like that?
In my case, I didn't go through a class. Some people do, and that's fine. I didn't go through a class. What I did do was went out and got a bunch of study manuals that you can get. Back then it was brick and mortar probably, but nowadays you can get them off Amazon or whatever online source you want to. And there's 3 parts to the exam. The first part is the individual side, which is the 1040, which I already knew obviously a great deal about from having spent 5 years with the franchise. The second part is business returns, which is everything from S corps to partnerships, a little bit on estates and a little bit on trusts as well. And the third part is all about ethics. And I studied on my own. To give you an idea, on the 1040 side, it was probably about 100 hours of study. On the business side, it was double that. It was about 200 hours. And on the ethics side, it was maybe 50 to 75. It was the least of the three. And the way the exam works is you schedule it with a particular testing center, and it's like going into a library, and you have headphones on, and you are in front of a computer, and you have a 10-key calculator available to you, obviously nothing else. And you answer a bunch of questions, and each section is about 3 hours long. I think the ethics section is the only one that's shorter. I think that's only about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So it's not all in one day, by the way. You schedule the 3 parts on 3 different days. That would be just cruel to have to do it in one day. But I passed all 3 on the first try. Very happy to have done that. And here I am 9 years later. So it's been a great trek.
How do you balance all of that time preparing for the exam with your already existing career back in 2014?
Right. A lot of studying, obviously, at night and sometimes late at night. I didn't mind because I knew the rewards that were on the other side. I didn't have a problem with being up until in some cases, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, even when I knew that I needed to be up, 6, 7 a.m. to get to work. So it's a matter of knowing the rewards that await you on the other side. You're willing to go without a little bit of sleep if you need to. And the nights before each of the sections of the exam, when I actually had to know my stuff and be in front of a computer without any reference material, those were nights where I didn't sleep very much, I'll be honest with you. But I got through it, and I'm happy I did. And very happy to be where I am right now.
Do you have any type of specialty with tax preparation?
Well, I do an awful lot of S corporation returns. I do a lot of partnership returns. And by nature, that leads back to the 1040 a great deal. I have not done very many farm returns just because the opportunity hasn't presented itself, nor have I done very many estate or trust returns. So it's been very heavy on the S Corp, on the partnership side. Obviously, a great number of Schedule Cs for people that have not elected another type of tax treatment. And for reasons that we can get into if you want to, I tend to recommend that people get away from the Schedule C if they can and move into a 1120S or a 1065 arrangement if they can possibly do so. But those are the areas that I seem to have settled into, and they have worked quite well.
Why is it that you would offer people that recommendation?
Primarily for 2 different reasons. And the one reason predominates over the other one, and that is that Schedule Cs on a 1040 tend to be looked at a lot more closely by the IRS than sometimes a K1 from a partnership or an S corporation might be looked at. I think the IRS view on this, I don't have any proof of it, but it seems to be, it's something that I've kind of come to a conclusion on myself, is that when you have a Schedule C, the IRS is always concerned, or a lot of times concerned, about how much of a profit motive you really have with the company or the business that you are claiming. If you go to the lengths of getting let's say an LLC name, that's what most people do now, and then the 2553 form, I believe it is, where you ask to be treated as a S Corp or as a partnership, if that applies with the IRS. I think the IRS viewpoint on you changes where they have documentation that you've sent in that says you have an LLC, you want to be treated as a separate entity for that LLC. And I just think that they look at that as proof of profit motive where you're in business. And the audit gloves tend to not come off so readily as they do with a Schedule C. I recently met with a friend of mine that had a Schedule C and has had a Schedule C for probably a decade now. And this person and his spouse they got audited 4 times. And I have to believe, although I don't have any proof of it, that it's because they're still operating as Schedule C rather than as one of the other entities. So I made the recommendation and we're talking about it.
You mentioned earlier that tax preparation is almost like solving a puzzle. How would you describe that, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, the puzzle solving process? What puzzles are you solving when you're looking at a tax form?
Well, no matter what the return is and no matter who the client is, you're getting a bunch of documentation to start. They're sending you documentation or they're sending documentation to some portal. And one of the first things that any preparer has to do, I'm no exception to that rule, is look at the documentation that's been sent. And number one, you'll get a decent lay of the land, if you will, regarding the taxpayer situation. Do they have a retirement account? Do they have a business? Are they married? Do they have children? So you're going to get a very 36,000 foot overview of their situation. But in almost every case as well, there's going to be documentation missing. And knowing what that documentation is that hasn't been included, that comes with experience and having gone through lots and lots of different returns. So if they mention that they have a 20-year-old in college, but there's no tuition statement that they've uploaded, that's something that you need to ask for. So I think we are in the business not so much of doing the return so much, although that's what we ultimately do so that it can be filed. We're in the business of actually guiding the taxpayer into providing us what we need to do what I call maximize their situation. That means either maximize their refund or minimize how much they owe. I'm of the opinion that clients pay us not so much for the return itself. That's a commodity. They're paying us for advice, if you will, on minimizing what they owe next year or maximizing what they're going to get back next year. So it's as much a counseling session, in my view, as it is a number crunch and put numbers on a form with tax software.
And you had that anecdote of the friend of yours that had been run into a few audits and you recommended changing their structure. What other examples do you have that kind of symbolize that balance of, like, you're not just preparing a return, but you're providing that, financial advice that would be carried on, years or decades from now?
Sure. I had another instance with a separate client where they owned multiple rental properties. And when I became their tax preparer, they told me right away that the year that they had hired me to file for them, they had sold 5 of their rental properties. And I point blank asked them, okay, what was your rationale for selling all 5 properties in 1 year? And they said, well, we wanted to, invest in some other things. And we figured that selling these 5 properties would be the best way to raise money to do so. And I said, well, there's certainly merit in that. I'm not going to deny that part. However, are you aware that there's something called depreciation recapture that you're likely going to have to pay taxes on? And they had no idea what I was talking about. Well, when you claim depreciation on a rental property, when you sell that property, more likely than not, you're going to have to pay taxes on the depreciation that you claimed in earlier years. And that was quite a shock to them. And also, rental property may or may not be capital gains on it. And depending upon how long you've owned the property, your cost basis may be much lower than your sales price. And you could have a fairly hefty tax bill between the depreciation recapture and whatever capital gains might be due on the sale. And as it turned out, they did. They had a pretty high tax bill because these were properties they owned for over a decade. And we talked, and I said, listen, understand if you do this again, just understand that you're going to owe taxes on the depreciation recapture plus any capital gains that may or may not be incurred as a result of the sale. And they were very appreciative of the advice. And I kept them as a private client for quite a while. And they reached out to me quite a bit over the next 2 or 3 years because of the fact that I mentioned all this to them, and they didn't have any idea. I wouldn't expect a taxpayer to know that. That's what they're paying us for. So that was another example for you.
How did he first hear about Taxfyle?
I believe that your colleague, John Jost, reached out to me over LinkedIn, actually. He noticed that I was a credentialed preparer out here in Vegas. I don't know if being in Vegas made any difference or not, but he noticed that I was a credentialed preparer and that I had been doing it for quite some time. And he reached out and said that you folks were always looking for good people to come on board and such. And I said, I'd be happy to talk to you. And we met much the same way you and I are doing this interview right now. And what struck me, first of all, was that we didn't have any advertising costs that we needed to incur with Taxfyle, that these were either CPA firms on the outsourcing side, or these were individual clients. I don't want to say private because they're your client, not mine, that were reaching out, that you had paid money to get, and we were coming in and preparing the tax returns for them and giving advice as needed. And it seemed to me a great marriage between the skilled pool of credentialed preparers out there and perhaps not having the need to shell out advertising dollars to build your own book of business. So I was very pleased when John reached out. We had a great chat, and I'll be entering my second year with Taxfyle this coming year.
How did Taxfyle fit into what you wanted out of your career at the moment when John approached you?
Well, I think it was a couple of things that really matched me, if you will. And of course, the first thing was the flexibility that's offered. If you don't feel comfortable taking on a certain outsourcing job or a certain client, you don't have to, no one's pressuring you to take them on. There might be issues, especially on the outsourcing side, with various pieces of software that maybe you're not attuned with or skilled on. And if you don't feel as though you would be able to, you'd be a good match for that particular outsourcing firm, you can just say, listen, I don't feel comfortable. They use software I'm not used to and such. Then again, on the other side of the coin, there's always an opportunity to learn here. And I find that to be quite valuable. There's always something to learn, either in the tax arena itself of the IRS or on the software side, because a lot of people are coming into the tax field with their individual way, their individual software that will help us take care of returns on a more efficient scale. So there's always something to learn. And if you don't know a piece of software now, rest assured, I've always found that Taxfyle was very good at giving you the opportunity to learn, so that when the next season comes, maybe there's an account or two you can pick up that you weren't able to the previous year. So I think it's quite valuable.
How can other enrolled agents like yourself maximize their credential through Taxfyle's platform?
Well, I think the more you increase your knowledge base, especially along the lines of different software that's out there, and I don't just mean tax software, I mean the support software. that helps data get imported into a return without necessarily the need for a lot of manual data entry. I think the more you increase your skill set in those areas, I think the world of tax prep really opens up to you in a way that maybe it wouldn't have otherwise. And especially during the season, whether it's the main season or the fall extender season, I think you can pretty much pick up work as you want to. And if you just don't feel comfortable taking on a specific job, you just say, it's not for me, but thank you anyway. I really think it's for especially for experienced folks who have been doing 1040s for a while and even business returns for a while. I think it opens up a way for you to expand what you are already doing without having a lot of the costs involved in doing that. And if you're a brand new preparer, credentialed, I would think would be important. If you're a brand new preparer, I think this is a great way to get going in the field and hone your skills and see if this whole thing called tax is something that you want to devote a lot of time to. I worked with a lot of great people here. Yourself, John, the whole staff is just amazing to work with, and very responsive, very willing to listen to the field, which you don't always find everywhere. And how can we improve? I've been asked that several times. How can we be better? How can we help you do your job better? How can we be better at Taxfyle? And I find that to be quite valuable to be able to give that input.
More specifically on that, how valuable is it having a dedicated support team like what Kirk and AG provide?
Oh, I think it's all the difference in the world, Christian, honestly, because we run into issues just like any other field runs into issues, either with outsourcing firms or with clients that come in privately through the portal. And it's just great to have someone to bounce ideas off of when you need to. And the Slack channels you all have set up and people being so responsive over email. I have never once felt like I was just out here on my own without any assistance or support. And I think that is just absolutely valuable, invaluable, actually. You can't put a price tag on that. And, there are times when things come through, there's no issues and all is good. But when there are things that need to be addressed, when there are questions that need to be answered, you folks have always been very quick to respond, usually the same day, but even if not the same day, definitely the next day. And the Slack channel has been especially valuable in that regard. I can send a message and likely get a response within an hour or two. And everybody is very open to hearing what you have to say. There's no instances of, oh, don't come to me with that. You should already know that. That's never happened with Taxfyle. And it really puts me at ease in the field. And I'm sure our, other tax professionals would agree that the level of ease that we feel working from home as we do, or working from a private office as some of us do, it makes this a very rewarding experience.
And when you were talking about having a well-rounded background in different tax software, why is it significant for somebody to know multiple different tax filing software?
Fabulous question. And I'll tell you right now, the reason is that we have the opportunity, if we so choose, to work with various CPA firms around the country that need our help, especially during the main season crunch. And they already have their ways of doing things, and they should. The different firms have different methods and processes and just ways of doing the return or getting the data prepped. And the more you can learn the systems they use, SurePrep is one that's becoming all the rage. It's not something that I knew a lot about this season. I am now learning, and it's fine. But there are firms out there that use SurePrep and other support software because they are high volume and they can't spend a lot of time on data entry. I fully understand that part. If you're a firm that's doing thousands of returns during the season, you can't get bogged down on data entry. You'll never get the job done. So they're using these types of support software to, as much as possible, automate the process of bringing data into returns. So the more you can learn what they are using and such, the better an asset you are to them, and the more likelihood there is, I think, of you fitting in well with a certain outsourced CPA type of job.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Is there anything I may not have asked you that you think is important people know about either yourself or Taxfyle's platform?
The only thing is I am not a native to Las Vegas. I actually grew up in upstate New York and obviously spent a good amount of my adult life there, and then decided several years ago that I was sick of wintertime and snow. So I made the trek out here to Vegas. I had been visiting out here, whether on vacation or for some other reason, 3 or 4 times, and I never really wanted to take the flight back home because I knew what I was going to run into, especially in the wintertime, digging my car out of an airport parking lot, which is never a fun thing in the Northeast. Anybody from there knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I moved out here to Vegas in 2016 and never regretted it, and love it out here, even in 115-degree heat. I'll take that over a blizzard every day of the week. And been loving it and really appreciate the opportunity, Christian.
Why did you settle in Las Vegas of all the warmer climates?
It's a party town. I enjoy having fun in an adult sense, like many other people do. An adult beverage here and there, going to a casino and making a donation, as we call it out here. We call it a donation because you're helping pay the state's bills. So any of you who have done that, thank you very much. And it's just a really nice area. The Vegas area has grown even since I've been out here, but it's grown exponentially even before I moved out here. And we now have about 1 million people, and they're projecting another 500,000 over the next several years. So it's a large city now. It's not on the pace of Phoenix yet, but it's a large city. There's a lot to do, obviously. No shortage of things to do up at Lake Mead on the weekends, and it's just a nice part of the country.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate you having the time to speak with me.
Christian, it's been a joy and an honor. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
That was this month's episode of Pro Spotlight. Please be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media for helpful tips, whether you run your own firm or an accountant or just want to know a little bit more about how to file taxes. Check out our blog at taxfyle.com.